Ryan Coogler's Sinners is the most important film of this decade because it's completely revamped how filmmakers approach cinema. Ryan Coogler has a deal with Warner Brothers, right? This deal basically grants him access to the rights of Sinners after 25 years. In order to own your film, you need a lot of leverage. You need to be someone like Quentin Tarantino. He has a massive track record and a lot of leverage in the studio system. Generally, when you make a film, especially for a big studio like Warner Brothers, you don't have ownership. And having ownership will generally give you a lot more access to profits. So why is it so important to have ownership? I like to compare this to long-term assets like real estate. Film is his, and over time, if it gains value, if it becomes a cult classic, Ryan Coogler will benefit from it financially instead of the studio getting those benefits. And so what it allows filmmakers to do is, they have more of a long-term equity stake in their projects. And I think that's so important because when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into these projects, when you're spending years writing and developing and shooting and editing, you deserve to have some ownership. This could be the beginning of a new wave in film history that empowers the filmmakers themselves instead of empowering the studios. For those of you who don't understand how big that is, let me explain. Today, we're in the hot seat, and I want to talk about Sinners. If you've seen it, you know why it's a big deal. And if you haven't, I'll explain why. This is not a plot summary, so I'm not going to break down a lot of the scenes, but instead, I want to talk about why this film is so important. I'll talk about topics including ownership, historical milestones, continued collaborations, technical innovations, box office success, and finally, the demand for movies shot on IMAX. I'm really big on pushing cinema and independent cinema, and most importantly, cinema that empowers filmmakers. And so I think the release of this film does a great job encapsulating all the things that are very important to me. So without further ado, let's dive into it. This episode is about one of the best movies of the year, Sinners. First, let's talk a little bit about ownership. Ryan Coogler has a deal with Warner Brothers, right? And this deal basically grants him access to the rights of Sinners after 25 years. For those of you who don't know, filmmakers generally can't really own their films, right? In order to own your film, you need a lot of leverage. You need to be someone like Quentin Tarantino, right? Tarantino has these kind of deals, right? He has a massive track record and a lot of leverage in the studio system, and people like him are able to land these kind of deals. But for the average filmmaker, they're not. So generally, when you make a film, especially for a big studio like Warner Brothers, you don't have ownership. So why is it so important to have ownership? What does ownership really get you? Well, I like to compare this to owning real estate. When you have ownership of your film, you essentially can treat it like a long-term asset, right? For lack of better words. The film is his, and over time, if it gains value, if it becomes a cult classic, Ryan Coogler will benefit from it financially instead of the studio getting those benefits. And so what it allows filmmakers to do is, they have more of a long-term equity stake in their projects, right? And I think that's so important because when you put your blood, sweat, and tears into these projects, when you're spending years writing and developing and shooting and editing, a project that is so true to you and true to your soul, like you deserve to have some ownership, right? And so I think what this does is it just creates a new precedent for filmmakers, and potentially in the long run, if these opportunities open up more for filmmakers like Ryan Coogler or anybody else who may be coming up in the independent scene, they're now able to have more negotiating power and get more in the back end from their hard-earned work. So the agreement that they made included $90 million upfront and final cut privileges. Now let me tell you something. In filmmaking, having final cut privileges is everything. And you're pretty lucky, actually, when it comes to like the major studios, whether it's in film or TV, you're very lucky to have creative control over the final cut. Oftentimes in like TV, for example, They might let you take a stab at the first cut with some feedback and some notes, maybe, a second round. But generally speaking, it's ultimately up to the studio who's distributing the project to make that decision. And while a lot of studio heads may disagree with this, on the flip side, it's a really beautiful thing for filmmakers because they can essentially have more creative control over the projects that they created and tell the stories exactly how they wanted to tell them in the first place. A lot of times, even in short form, when I put together a project, and let's say I'm commissioned for a music video from a label, ultimately, it's not my final decision on how I want things to look if the artist or the label executives, disagree with me. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they're paying for the project. I'm hired for it. And so when it comes down to it, I can't make the final decisions unless they tell me I can, right? But a lot of times that's not the case. You're hired for a job, whether you're doing a 3-minute music video or a 2-hour film, you're hired for that job. Usually it's not your money, right? And so because they are the client and because you are for hire, you have to abide by those rules, and you're not going to have all the creative autonomy that you may like to have, and that's important now because we're sometimes forced to compromise on ideas that we don't want to compromise on. Some of the best movies you've seen have had to been cut down a lot. They've had to been switched up, edited. They've had to been completely revised. You don't know it. We never know it. And imagine if those filmmakers had their creative control. We would have seen totally different movies with totally different outcomes, And while the average person may not realize those things, it's important to know for those who want to get into filmmaking because it's a blessing to have creative control. And so this sets an amazing precedent. And this is seen as a new shift in how filmmakers are now negotiating with studios. So hopefully it gives more power to directors, to writers, creative producers. We'll see, I'm optimistic. The next thing I want to talk about here is, the historic milestones that this film made, more particularly with women. Sinners marked a huge milestone for women in cinematography. And the cinematographer, Autumn Dural Arkapaw, she became the first woman to shoot a theatrical feature film using IMAX 65mm film cameras. I think that's awesome. I think we need more women in cinematography. I think there needs to be more trust in women in cinematography. And what I love about this whole story is that, Coogler trusted her, to shoot in this format. He trusted her vision. He trusted all the creative decisions that she wanted to make. And they have an amazing working relationship, an amazing collaborative relationship. I went to a talk that they did a few days ago, actually, here in Los Angeles. And at this talk, I was seeing Coogler and Autumn's energy like back and forth as they were talking about the cinematography, the filmmaking. Not only did they give each other their flowers, but they were very synergistic. And one thing that I saw and one thing that they talked about at this little panel they did was that, it's very collaborative. And Ryan Coogler himself even said like he felt like he wasn't always right about things. Even when he thought he was right, Autumn would challenge him. And sometimes when she challenged him, they came up with an idea that was beyond what Ryan could have even imagined. And this is important because it's a testament to the power of collaboration, right? And that actually takes me to my next point, which is the importance of collaboration and the importance of trusting your collaborators. Because if you can't trust the people you're working with, your project may not live up to its full potential, right? You don't want your cinematographer, you don't want your crew, you don't want anyone in your film crew to always say yes to you, because you need them to challenge you and you need them to come with their own ideas. That's why you're hiring them, right? You're taking the genius from every single person on the crew and you're taking everybody's experiences and their brains and their input to create something magical. That's the goal with film, right? And the fact that Ryan, gave Autumn the keys and the permission to just come with her own collaborative juice, I think that's a testament to why the film Sinners ended up being so good. It was a true collaborative effort. And what's so cool is that this isn't even their first film together. They did Black Panther, Wakanda Forever together. And even that alone, the fact that, this is like a repeat collaboration, it's a testament to how important it is to have a trusted collaborator and someone who you can work with multiple times. The best thing about finding a great collaborative partner is that once you develop a level of trust with them, there's almost like an unspoken language on set. Like I generally use the same DPs and the same people on my shoots. And the reason I do that is because there's things that I like that are unspoken and they just understand how to execute it, right? I sometimes don't even need to say much. I'm just like, I look at the set and then the DP will be like, okay, I know what to do. I get it, right? And they'll come with their own touch, their own flavor. They'll add their own genius to it. But what I'm saying is like, I don't need to sit down and train them every time or for lack of better words, I don't know, like tell them what I like. You know what I mean? I'm just able to communicate seamlessly. And I think having trusted collaborative partners is important because it allows you to be more efficient and get things done a lot more smoothly, a lot quicker, and ultimately end up with a better final product. Now, on the note of continued collaborations, y'all know where I'm going with this. Michael B. Jordan. Every Ryan Coogler film has incorporated Michael B. Jordan in some capacity. This is literally the modern day version of Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro. Yes, I said it. Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan are the modern day Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro. It's continued collaboration. They're continuing to make incredible pieces of art. And there is such a high level of trust between the director and the actor that they're able to continue elevating each other when they're making more films. Like, how crazy is it that every film they do together just gets better and better and better? And how insane is it that they're still very early in their careers, Like, this is very exciting for cinema. And this is so exciting for me because it inspires me to go out and find my Michael B. Jordan, Like, I'm Iranian. I've had this conversation with a lot of my Iranian friends. And ultimately, I would love to have Iranian actors who I could continuously work with and build together and create and grow. And I think, Coogler and Michael B. Jordan are setting a new precedent in that regard. And I think that's important. So, the fact that Coogler's loyal to his cinematographer and he's loyal to Michael B. Jordan, it's just a testament to show that greatness can stem from loyalty and continued collaboration. I think so. Like, it's not bad to try new cinematographers, try new actors out. It'll help give you like new flavors to your project. But when you just speak the same language as someone in your crew, it's speaking that language it's so valuable. And I think that's why their films are just incredible every time. Next, let's talk about the technical innovations that have come from this film. You've heard it. Everybody's talking about IMAX and 70 millimeter film and, seeing this on the big screen. And I think that's so awesome because I really can't remember the last time people hyped up an IMAX film this much. Like, I remember people hyping up Oppenheimer and seeing it in IMAX, but there wasn't as much emphasis. I know they shot on 65 millimeter film cameras, I believe. And I think the fact that they're like using that so much in their marketing and even their PR is kind of incredible because it's allowing the consumer to understand the importance of shooting in large formats like this. We're generally used to seeing standard film formats, which are still beautiful. But a lot of the films we're seeing are shot in a standard aspect ratio, and they're shot digitally. But this was shot on IMAX and in film. And so you're taking incredible elements, two incredible elements, not only beautiful elements, but ambitious elements. And you're making a film like this. I mean, it's going to create a different filmmaking experience. And so I think because they were willing to innovate and because they got permission to innovate, You know, they have opened up the floodgates for IMAX and 65 millimeter filmmaking to potentially have a new wave in cinema. Let's hope more films are made like this. Let's hope that we're not forced to shoot on the standard aspect ratios digitally, you know? Let's hope that we're able to experiment with new formats and new types of cinematography, because that's going to change the game for a lot of the ways that we experience and view movies. And one thing I thought was so cool about this film was that Coogler said himself that he sought advice from people like Christopher Nolan on large format cinematography. And I think that's so cool that Coogler had the humility to go out and seek advice and help from some of the people who've done it before him, because a lot of times as filmmakers, we think we got it down. You know, we think we'll figure it out. But if you can find someone to help mentor you throughout the process and you know, elevate your craft, that'll take things to the next level. And now people, I'm sure, are going to be going to Coogler for his advice, you know, when they start shooting on large format IMAX cameras, you know. But this is awesome. I really can't remember. Like, I felt like the first time I heard this much hype about an IMAX film was when I was a kid. I can't even remember what movie it was, but I remember IMAX was like a huge deal when I was a kid, and I'm feeling that excitement again, coming back into theaters. And what's crazy is that the hype has built up so much that they're literally re-releasing the film, you know, in IMAX, and it's allowing people to get that full cinematic experience that Coogler wanted them to get, you know. So that's awesome. I think that's amazing. In addition to the technicalities of, you know, shooting this in the IMAX and film format, people don't talk enough about the dual portrayal of Michael B. Jordan as the twins. You have Smoke and Stack. You have Michael B. Jordan playing two characters, and you forget that they're the same guy playing two people because he's able to portray them so well. Like he really embodied two different characters so beautifully, and for me as a viewer, he honestly fooled me. And what I think was even cooler was that they were able to block the scenes in certain ways that made the duplication feel even more real. Like it wasn't your traditional tripod shot, locked off, copy, you know, split it down the middle, copy one scene and paste into the other. This was totally different. Like they were using motion control. And for those of you who don't know what motion control is, it's basically a rig that has a controlled movement, and you can duplicate that movement multiple times. So you can film the same scene with the same exact camera motion, the exact same timing, the exact same speed. And because the motion control is so precise, you're able to essentially duplicate and paste scenes together, similar to how if you were to shoot on a tripod, but with movement. But because the movement's exact, you can literally like put multiple things in that scene. You could essentially copy and paste things into that scene by shooting that scene multiple times. I know that's a little bit confusing, but in other words, if I were to simplify it in the simplest terms ever, it's literally like a moving tripod with perfectly controlled movement. And it'll allow you to copy and paste scenes together. And because they did this so well, they were able to show interactions between the two characters that Michael B. Jordan portrayed, such as passing a cigarette to one another or, you know, driving in the same car together. Like these little things were so cool to see because you don't see motion control utilized a lot in this regard in films. And what's even more impressive is that, from what I heard, is that they would shoot a scene and then Michael B. Jordan would, you know, play one of the twins, he'd go change and come back and play the other twins. And they had to do it that way because when you have the camera set up and locked in a certain position, you can't move it. You're never going to find that exact place again. So you have to literally get the exact shot. He has to go change, then come back and do it in the second outfit, and then go back and change again for the next scene. And the fact that he probably had hundreds of wardrobe changes is absolutely insane to me, because I can't even imagine how much extra time that added to the shooting schedule. And the fact that Michael B. Jordan was able to keep flip-flopping back and forth between characters and nail the characters so well, I mean, you got to give this man his flowers. Like, shout out to Michael B. Jordan. That is not easy to do. Nobody realizes how hard that is to do. Trust me, I've done motion control. It's not easy. It is not easy, especially for actors who have to flip-flop. I've never even experienced that myself. You know, I've usually had different actors, or I've duplicated like the same actor, but to duplicate one actor playing two different roles, that's crazy. That's insane for the mental. Like, you have to be a very advanced actor to be able to pull that off. And also have the patience to be able to tolerate doing multiple wardrobe changes in between takes. That's tough. So shout out to them. I think that is insane. Michael B. Jordan, you crushed it. You did an amazing job. And man, I would just love to someday I hope I could just sit with Michael B. Jordan and talk to him about that experience. And even with Ryan Coogler, talk to him about that experience and see how they were able to tolerate it on their own. Because for me as a director, I feel like I would lose my shit. I feel like I would lose my patience, So I would love to someday talk to them both and figure out, how they were able to kind of collaborate together and make that happen so seamlessly. And if Coogler got impatient, because to me, that feels like an incredibly long process. Yeah, that's just my 2 cents, The next thing I want to talk about is the box office success. What's so cool about this film is that, they really prioritized it with the filmmaker in mind, right? Coogler got an amazing deal. He got a lot of creative authority. And on top of that, it became a box office success. As of now, at the time that I'm recording this episode, this movie has grossed over $292 million worldwide, so almost $300 million. It's the 5th highest grossing film of the year. It's gotten so much, recognition for being an amazing horror film. It was visually innovating. The storytelling was amazing. It's become a success, right? And it's become so much of a success that people want to see it more and more again, and they want to see it in IMAX again. And so now IMAX, again, at the time that I'm recording this week, they're literally re-releasing it, for more people to see it in IMAX. And in fact, I tried to get a ticket myself to see it again, and I couldn't because they were sold out. They were sold out as soon as they announced that re-release was going to happen in IMAX. And I think that's awesome. I'm really bummed that I can't get a ticket to see it again. But I think, ultimately it's good for the movie and it's good for cinema. So I'm excited about it. I'm happy. I feel lucky to be living in this era where we can, experience this and where we can really, see this new wave happening in film and cinema and be a part of a movement that hopefully empowers filmmakers more, So yeah, there's a lot of people to shout out here. So first, I want to shout out Ryan Coogler and Autumn Dural Arkapaw. I loved seeing you both speak at the event here in LA at the Kodak House the other day. It was so awesome. I was inspired. I was well informed. I was so moved. I also want to shout out, of course, Michael B. Jordan and the entire cast. I think y'all crushed it. I also want to shout out Warner Brothers, because I think Warner Brothers, you guys are setting precedent. You are setting precedent for the future of filmmaking. You are changing the game for creative ownership, and you are really opening doors for potential indie filmmakers to come in and keep, changing how filmmaking is structured and how deals are structured. And I hope that this continues to allow for cinema to continue to improve and for us to not always rely on those, classic franchise films like the Marvel movies and Star Wars, which, by the way, it's funny that Coogler was also a Marvel director, but that's a separate conversation. But my point is that I'm happy we don't always have to rely on these giant franchise films for movies to be a success, right? It's awesome that it doesn't have to be a superhero movie to be a hit, because now it gives studios and executives a little bit of faith that, hey, we can tell real stories and still make money too. And for that, I think indie cinema is about to have the biggest wave in the history of film. You heard it here first, y'all. That's my little recap about how I feel about Sinners, how I feel about the current climate of indie cinema and cinema as a whole. And I'm super excited for the future. That's it, y'all. Thanks for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you to everyone for tuning in every week. This show is slowly but surely growing every day, and I'm so thankful for you. And I just need your help with something. I need you to subscribe on all platforms. I need you to go to your podcast platforms and give this show a thumbs up or 5 stars or leave a comment. And the more you can help me grow the show, the more I can get cool guests on, the more output I could have with episodes, because right now I'm still doing a lot of it myself. And so I'm limited in terms of how much time I have to be able to do all these things myself. That's my spiel. Thanks again. And most importantly, I want to give a big round of applause to ourselves. Thanks, y'all. That's it for today. Peace.